welcome to our guest teacher, Keiryū, Liên Shutt. Is that Shunbo's K?
Shunbo's what? Yes.
And the Ryu is the dragon, I presume.
Yes.
So Keiryu started out, it was born in Vietnam and started practicing with insight meditation and eventually turned to Zen and started did you start at the San Francisco Zen Center?
Well, I went there at the Buddhist of color, but really my Zen practice started at Tassajara.
Okay. She's one of the founding members of the Buddhist of Color. That was in 1998. And so she started her serious practice at Tassajara, which is the monastery of the San Francisco Zen Center, as you probably know. And she also practiced at City Center with her teacher, Blanche Hartman, Shunbo Blanche Hartman. And also known as Zen K, Total Joy. And she practiced also, I knew you were in Japan, but you said also in Vietnam, in monastic practice and training there, and then returned and received a Dharma transmission from, what is it Shunbo or Zen-Kei that she wanted?
Zen-Kei.
Because she used to be Shunbo and then it changed at some point, so I'm still back at Shunbo. And so that makes Keiryu my Dharma niece. Shunbo, Zen-Kei, Blanche Hartman is my Dharma sister, but also a great teacher for me. And so we're very happy to have her, and many of you are her students, so thank you for coming.
Thank you, Mary, for the invitation to speak today. My students, when we were in the garden before, were just asking how I knew you, and I said through Blanche, of course, and at Tassajara when you used to come with the lawyers every spring. And coming, this is my first time here, and coming with the students, I was saying, it's my first time, I don't know anything anyways, and yet, because it's a Zendo, they'll have some sense of home, because that's a great thing. It's kind of like, wherever you go, there's a Zendo or a Zen environment to come into that is different and yet the same, and there's a certain resonance that's always settling and hits the heart, you could say. So thank you. Really honored to be here. Let me start. Are you ready? So let me set the scene for you. A man is in therapy. Right? He's in therapy because a very good friend, an ex-lover in fact, told him he needed to go to therapy, even though he's a wonderful human being. And yes, she can see that he had a lot of suffering that he needed to deal with. So that was in the last episode. So the beginning of this episode starts out, you hear his voice first, right? And he's in a room of his own choice, talking to someone. And starts out, then you see him and it's not clear, but you see his hand on some cloth thing, and it's a couch, right? So he's talking and he's telling the person in the room about the feel of lukewarm water for a 5-minute only shower that he gets once a day in prison, on death row. So he's talking to a therapist. Now, while suggested by a close friend, the man has chosen to engage with a therapist. Now he's out of prison. Right? He's chose to engage, I would say, openly as he can, because isn't that what should happen when you go to therapy? Right? The willingness to engage with another being as open and wide as you can. To lay out all of what you think is bad about you, perhaps, what you've done wrong, what you're regretful about, what you wish would be different. At least I know when I went to therapy, that's what I did. Maybe not always consciously, or often not maybe so openly and more resistant to that, and yet that's the intention. Right? And for some of us, I would say, we also have that sense when we come to practice discussion or dokusan. Right? You want to come in connection with somebody that you feel you can, that sees you and you can be open with. Perhaps to like lay bare your soul to somebody. And for what purpose? These are some I've thought up. You'll have your own. Let's see if some of them resonate with you. Perhaps to be forgiven and then accepted. Again, maybe that resonates for you. And in a way, perhaps that's what we've been taught, right? To go forth and lay bare our soul, our hurts and our pain, our suffering. So in some ways, we're looking for them to be absolved. So in thinking about this, I looked up what absolved mean, right? To set or declare someone free from blame, guilt, or responsibility, right? The pardon absolved them of any crimes, as an example. So back to the scene. Are you ready? The man is sitting with his therapist. He then pulls out a smartphone. It looks like an iPhone, right? And he presses a button. And then the therapist asks, "Are you ready?" He, maybe you, me, she, they, we say, "Yes, I am." Hai, yes, I will. In the scene, the man says, "Yes, I am." And then there's a pause, and then he says, "I am ready." So, he, she, they, you, me, we, then pushes the button to self-record, to tape our story, in this show. He tapes himself so that later, outside of the container of the therapy, he listens to his story again, right? And in this episode, or this TV show, right, this Netflix show, he does it as homework. His homework is to listen to himself telling the story while he was in the container, the safety container of therapy, or a safe environment of therapy. And he was raped in the shower, right? So it's his homework, and it's very clear in the episode that it's his homework to listen, to really listen. Now, when I think about homework, I think it's work you do at home. Isn't that true? Like when you're in school, homework is work you do at home. And then I was thinking, what if homework is really work that you do to find your way home, to come back to a sense of home? So wonder with me, if you will, what would that mean? What might that be to have a feeling of returning home? To feel the rest, you think, that comes when you've come home. Hopefully of being able to let down your guard, perhaps to feel like you can be accepted. That's what many of us want from a sense of home. Now back to our story. Are you ready? So the man, perhaps you and me, is with his therapist, and he's willingly pushes the button to self-record, again, so he can hear it later. To hear and to listen to a story in his head, right? And yet it's a story he's already lived. Right? So that's important. It's a story he has already lived. Right? This is big and this is important, I think. It's a story that he, she, you, me, we have already lived. So why do you think we need to hear it again? Perhaps, probably, because we couldn't take it in before. We were not able to let ourselves take it in, be with it when it happened before. So the first noble truth is that there is suffering, there is dis-ease, there is conditions that are hard to be with. And the second noble truth is that the impact of the suffering brings up strong reactions. For many of us, emotions and thoughts. And we tend to run away from that. Right? Or more specifically, I would say we obsessively think and make wishes for how it's not the way it was and could it be different. Right? Mostly we don't want to be there for the sensations, the emotions, the thoughts that come through our senses in the experience. Often we find it too difficult to bear. So we run away from it, push it away, or delude ourselves that it's different, that it's something other than this, as it is. So he, she, they, you, me, we, perhaps, are the ones who has to hear it again. So are you ready? This time to really listen to how we were impacted all these years, how we carried these stories all these years. And it's a good spiritual friend or guide who not only makes it possible for us to be willing to be with it now, it's also one who helps us to willingly push the button, in this case on a recorder, you could say, to listen again to your story, to really, really let it in. And it's a good friend, a spiritual guide who can help you to build a sense of capacity to be with your stories, your hurts, your pains, your suffering. To identify it clearly and build capacity to be with it. And there's lots of homework, right? So are you ready to listen and re-listen to your stories over and over again? Right? This time around. So that's the other big piece, I would say, is this time around, right? Which means it's different than the story before. It's how you're with it, your recollection with it now, right? So the story has already happened to us. Are we willing to let it in, to deal with the hurts and pains that arise now? Or more specifically, to deal with the process of being with it, the uncomfortableness, the dis-ease of how our life was not what we thought it should or could, right? Or how perhaps it didn't happen the way we thought it should, right? Now, even though we talk a lot about the content that in our stories, it isn't really the content in some ways that we're reliving. So some of us sometimes find situations that seem very similar, right? Mostly, though, we focus on the story, right? And it seems so real, doesn't it? The characters, the objects, the things out there, right? And our memories of them. But we get stuck in the content, but really with perhaps a spiritual guide or friend, we really learn how can we handle, right? How are we with what arose then and now that is important. That's, I think, where our attention needs to be more focused. It's interesting in the episode, or in the show, by the way, this is Netflix Rectify, right? 4 seasons, right? So in there, the therapist, when he's telling his story, tries very hard to have him talk of it in the first person, because it's his story. Like to help him experience it, be with his experience of it, right? So it often guides him towards what are the sensations, right? In some ways, when we remember things, often we remember the sensation, right? He starts out talking about the rape in the shower by the temperature of the water, by the feel as a foot was on his neck or his back, right? So, now, I was watching this show and I was really struck by some aspects of it. And I was thinking, you know, often we think of what these days, what Netflix come up for most of us, that it's binge watching, right? And for many of us, or the idea of it is that it's escapism, right? And yet I wonder if it serves a purpose, right? It's not, on a certain level, it's not what we do, it's the quality in which you do it, right? So that's also the difference between, are you obsessively watching it, or are you watching it because there's some resonance in it? So I'm thinking more about the resonance, right? So maybe it serves a purpose because we're not able to bear our own suffering. And these shows are like transitional stories for us of suffering, that we often pick shows that have some sense that we're familiar with, right? Something we can relate to. To be able to practice how to be with and integrate aspects of ourselves and our lives that we have a hard time. I think on some level, you know, our practice of awareness is just this. Being able to really identify, again, and build capacity to be with sensations, emotions, and thoughts, you know, that are either too unpleasant or too pleasant, and our reactions to them. Right? So we make it, in mindfulness on a certain level, you make it into objects that you can really observe, so that you build up the capacity of being able to be aware of what's going on, right? To be able to relate to it more and more. And ironically, as long as you have guidance and you have a clear sense, even though you make it into object, the key, of course, is that you realize that it's objects, right? And not you, or not something solid, right? That it's an object of your observation. Right? That's also key. So, perhaps we binge watch these shows because we're watching and learning for ways to relate to our own stories. We watch these shows to be able to deal with emotions out there first. To deal with it, we think, in outside things and experiences, again, to build capacity to eventually be with our own internal experiences. Things like someone was telling me that they were with a friend, a male friend who was very typical male normative behavior around emotions. He didn't like to talk about his emotions or express them. And they had gone to a funeral, and then afterwards he really wanted to watch, this is a while back, the Tom Hanks movie when he had got AIDS. Do you remember? It was like a tearjerker. It was a big aspect too. And the person was very surprised because this person, you know, she didn't think related to the story itself about someone with AIDS and dying. And so she was really curious why he wanted to watch this movie. And then as it went along, she really got it because he was crying the whole time as he was watching the movie. So perhaps, I mean, as in retrospect, and I got this is my interpretation, right? That it was hard for him to be with his emotion at the funeral for someone he knew in real life. And so he went home to watch a movie to let us cry, right? And I know I do that too, right? Or to watch certain TV shows. Another person was telling me that they like to watch, I always call it SUV, but it's SVU, I think, right? Because, you know, like the criminals are always caught and the victims are always getting, you know, justice. And also, though, they express to me what they appreciate about that show is that the perpetrators, there's a story also about the perpetrator and how we can understand and how they came to be that way, right? So, I think that it's, as humans, it's hard for us to be with our own experience. And there's so much in our daily life that asks us not to be with our experience. And so it helps us, again, to identify and build capacity to be with it. You know, and then in Zen, we like to say much more like just letting go of the hand of thought. You know, it's just a thought, it's just a concept. And that's great. And it's a great practice. And I say, for most of us, it's hard to do if you don't know how to identify what you need to let go, right? Because for most of us, it isn't just the concept that's difficult, it's the emotions that come and that we have, by not dealing with them initially, carried the same emotions over and over, right? Or for a long time. It becomes, in a way, we often think as part of us. And the great thing about watching a TV show, right, is that we get to submerge ourselves completely in the story, right? The great thing about Netflix is that you can pause it at any time. You can watch it in any order you want. Oh, I don't like this one. I'm going to, you know, you can look at the episode description and then you move to another one if you don't like that one, right? You get to suspend your belief about it. It doesn't even have to be true per se. Now, before I got hooked, I recently got hooked on Netflix, right? But before that, even for the people been with the sitting group for a while, I remember at one point a sitting group member was talking about how she'd love to be aware of things and be with her emotion, in that case was anger, but she found herself going home and watching The Tudors. And I was like, what is The Tudors? You know, first, because I had no context of it at that time. And she's like, oh, it's this very historically incorrect show of 16th century England, but what was his name? I wrote it down. Jonathan Rhys-Meyer is great, and that's why I watch it, right? And so she herself knew it wasn't like correct historical, but it was the, you know, something to respond to, right? Something she could relate to and be with, right? And she was not alone. I heard it's a very popular show, right? And again, we get to control how and when we hear this story, right? Now that I do watch Netflix, I know sometimes we watch intense shows, and then Deb and I often we say, okay, let's pause that and let's watch a nature show because we need to, like, you know, cool off and calm down before we go to bed. But then, you know, we've been watching Africa. Have you watched Africa? They're mostly getting killed and beating up each other. So we have to find another nature show to calm ourselves down from one nature show, right? And no, the thing about binge watching too is you get to really choose your own genre, right? Drama, anyone?
Yeah.
Comedy, right? I recently heard she was very successful or a big comedian, Tig, and she had a stand-up show for like an hour. She had cancer. Her whole show is on cancer. So that was comedy and drama at the same time. It got my tears going, right? Or crime drama, a lot of people like, docudrama, or reality TV. We watch TV to watch reality. Isn't that interesting, right? So maybe he, she, they, you, me, we have to process our story out there before the story can be internalized in here, right? Perhaps binge watching can be seen as a way for us to learn to be with stories like ours until we can be with stories, our own stories, and our own lives. I need to be watching the time. So, our stories are full of intensity. First noble truth. It brings up strong feelings, sensations, thoughts, memories, visions, ideas, concepts. Second noble truth. So learning how we can be with it and hopefully heal and integrate the intensity of our lives is a third noble truth, right? And of course, the Eightfold Path is the fourth noble truth. A path or a way to frame how we can be with our lives and our reactions, and hopefully then become our responses to it. So are you ready to listen to your life stories now? To be able to integrate, right, as a way to know your awakeness. So really, we don't practice to make right or change what was or is our story in our life. I say we practice to integrate, right, these stories, these feelings, these emotions, these thoughts. So are you ready? Right? Now it's interesting, I had more, but I'm trying to watch the time. The Eightfold Path, right? All the 8 components is Samma, is the first, right? Samma, Sankappa, Samma, Samadhi, right? Samma is usually translated as right? Right intention, right? Right concentration for Samadhi. Classically, that's the translation of Samma, but other translation of Samma are, these days, wise is very popular, appropriate, complete, perfect, whole, right? Perfect as in its whole and complete. So the Eightfold Path are ways to help us. I think one interpretation, the one I'm offering today, is how can we bring in things in a whole, complete way? How can we, in doing the Eightfold Path, be able to integrate the parts that we think are outside us or we've made into objects, the people, the stories, right? And how do we integrate in our responses to it? How do we integrate that into ourselves? How do we make ourselves whole and complete? So are you ready to take in your life as it is, everything about it, and which includes your reactions to it? That's the question, I'd say. Are you ready? Thank you. I left a few minutes for questions and answers. Does anyone have any?
Go ahead.
We're guests here, so
Okay.
you go first.
So you talked about homework
Mm-hmm.
and going home. Where is home?
Where's home for you, Zach?
Well, when you said that, I thought of, isn't it Thich Nhat Hanh who says when you're doing zazen and your mind wanders and you come back to the present, you're coming home.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the first thing that came to my mind, coming back to being present.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think that's what you were talking about.
Oh.
Well, okay, I shouldn't say that.
To me, having been someone who, for many of my parts of my life, I thought I was taken from my home. I was taken from Vietnam. Like I was a child when I left. So my taken is I wasn't asked, do you want to go? I was taken. So home has been a big thing for me. I think home, of course, home is a literal place without a doubt, right? For many of us, home is a literal place. And having gone back to Vietnam the first time to go home and then finding out, no, not true. And having to integrate that I'm not Vietnamese, if I am comfortable in Vietnam, that I thought that made me more, Vietnamese, and if I went home, but learning that the whole idea of Vietnam was exactly that, an idea. And one, it's change, and two, home in some ways is here. So in some way, what I'm saying is, in a way, how do we all, wherever our home physically, I would say on a certain level, all of us have a home in the sense of where we first grew up, or were born, first grew up, and then all the stories that go with that, or experiences that become stories. By the way, for me, story's not a problem, right? It's what you do with your stories that can become a problem, right? So in essence, we aren't with our stories, and therefore, or we're with them in ways that make problem, and that's the problem. And so in a way, integrating, by my saying integrating, is that you take them on and you process them, and you realize where is it that due to causes and conditions, things have become how they are, and what you have now, right? To be home is to be completely present with them, right? And how are you? And mostly we practice to be, how are we as we're with them? I mean, it's a nice idea to think, oh, I'm going to be with them. But most of us are like, no, I don't want it. Or I want more of it, of this part, but not that part. Wouldn't you say? I mean, that's my experience. So. And that's why it is said, if you're in the present, for the most part, everything's okay. If you're really present, not your idea of present, mind you. Right? And the problem, of course, is present keeps changing. And we like this present, but maybe that present over there somehow wasn't what I thought, right? So that's the problem. Oh, of course.
No, you have one.
Okay, and I have one here too, so.
That's okay, I was just gonna make a comment, so.
Okay. I didn't see the hand back there, so.
You had yours.
No, I didn't.
Maybe this is your guide saying you have a question. Yes, your name? Tell us your name.
I can't let go of this man who was raped on death row.
Yeah.
So home for him must include that experience.
Exactly. So is there a question? Or?
I mean, I guess that was my question. I'm surmising, but it just seems like an unsurmountable task to really make that home.
But isn't that, we all have an unsurmountable task of our own, at least one, most of us, wouldn't you say?
I don't think mine's that big.
Well, for each of us, there's almost always at least one something that is huge for us, right? I mean, the thing about the show, of course, is that it's easy to see. Maybe that's why we watch shows that have intense situation, right? Is that it's easy to see how this suffering is huge. Sometimes part of how we react, or we've been taught to react to our stories, is that, it's not that bad, or we want to say it's not that bad. And he even wanted to say, well, that's what happens in prison. Like, that's just part of being in prison. And that's why he didn't want to deal with it. And then he got to a point where he was like, I don't know if I have the strength to deal with it. And his friend was saying, you're doing great, and a lot of things are going well, and I think that's something you need to go meet and deal with to really be free. So, and then, I can kind of give away the show a little bit by saying, so the show is really about when he was convicted of having raped and killed his girlfriend in high school. And the show is about when they realized that, due to DNA testing 19 years later, that it wasn't his, so he was freed. And so the impact of it on himself, his family, the community, there's a lot of layers, but basically the thing is about, is he literally free even though he's out of prison? And in a way, how does he live his life not confined by his experience of being imprisoned? And is he really free now, even though he can literally walk to wherever he wants or eat whatever he wants now, take long showers or whatever, right? And so that's why it's so compelling to me. It's like, what is the prison, right? Is it the literal prison, or the prison of the way we've told our stories, or the way we've been with our experiences? Be they these huge experience or small experience, right? And then there are other aspects, like how do we deal with disappointment? How do we deal with grief? And then in the end, and on a certain level, I think it's pretty clear in the story, so I'm not totally giving spoiler alert, so that, if you did want to go home and watch 4 seasons, and it's over in 4. Let me just tell you that. I was like, what? I didn't realize until the beginning of the last episode, the 4th one. I'm like, oh my God, this sounds like it's going to be over. And then, of course, now I'm like looking up, yes, it's the last season, right? Is that, in a way, I would say, it seems to me the lesson he learns in the last episode is that when you're with your experience, it comes with disappointment, it comes with pain, and being able to have that, and then have the hope that that you've survived that. Like, when we go through it, then we survive. We don't survive our traumas until we've processed it. Otherwise, we're traumatized. In essence, when do you become not a victim anymore and you become your own life? Like when life doesn't feel like it's happening to you and you are living your life. And in essence, to me, that's our practice. Mostly we go around going, wow, shit's happening to me, right? Until we learn to go, oh, where's my power, where's my volition, my karma, in this, where is it that I can respond versus react, right? And his story is huge about that, and so that's my takeaway, why I watched it, right? This is why I binge watch it, not repeat it, It's been years now I've been watching this, right? Because it reiterates for me a story that I find very compelling and is helpful to me, right? That it's surviving our traumas and our pains and being with them, and then finding that, wow, I've survived, I didn't die, I'm not necessarily, yes, maybe I'm a little bit more limpy, but you know, I'm still very capable, able, and I find hope and awesomeness in life. And so that's life. That's life over and over again. Sometimes little and sometimes big. Yes, and I didn't get your name though, I asked your name. Lana, okay. And it's time, all right. Was there a comment you wanted to share? No, all right, thank you.